Greetings, family, and welcome to another edition of KSOL Black Talk Radio, the new black media. Family, today's video is about Justice Clarence Thomas, the coon, token, Negro peon that sits on the Supreme Court Justice. The United States Supreme Court on Wednesday appeared poised to side with a black Mississippi death row inmate tried 6 times for a 1996 quadruple murder, who accused the prosecutor of repeatedly removing black jurors to help win a conviction in an oral argument in which Justice Clarence Coon Thomas broke a 3-year silence. Well, family, let me stop for a second and pause. You mean to tell me that for the past 3 years, Clarence Thomas has been sitting on the bench silent? What is your purpose on the Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Clarence Coon Thomas, aside from being a token Negro and agreeing with everything and going along with white supremacists? What is your purpose of being on the Supreme Court Justice if you're silent for 3 years? And oh, why is it that all of a sudden you're opening your mouth? Well, let's see. Let's get back to the story. Thomas, a conservative justice and the court's only black member, usually does not speak during arguments. That's because they got Clarence Coon Thomas trained like a good little boy. You're supposed to be seen and not heard, in other words. Thomas asked several questions from the bench, his first since 2016, in the case involving Curtis Flowers, 48. His remarks, focusing on whether defense lawyers sought to exclude white people from the jury, indicated that Clarence Thomas may vote against the defendant, though other justices signal sympathy toward Flowers' claim. Well, let's just stop for a second here. We know for the longest now that this racial system, this American racial system that they try to pass off as a criminal justice system, well, we're not going to call it that because we're going to call it exactly what it is. It's a racial system. It's an American racial system. It's based solely on race, starting and ending with black people. That's what this system is. Let's be clear and let's be honest. That's what it is. I know white people, they want to try to fool you and sugarcoat their words and try to convince you that it is a justice system and all this and that. But let's be honest, it's not. It's a racial system. That's what it is. And Clarence Thomas, this coon, he supports it fully. He's the one that keeps the wheels rolling in the direction it's going. These are the type of black men that I actually literally hate. And I don't even like to use that word, but I hate black men, if that's what you want to call them, like Clarence Thomas. I hate coons like this person right here. This is the type of man like the Tommy Sotomayers, for instance, who hate themselves. They hate their families. They hate their mothers and fathers. They simply hate the black skin they're in. So they like to think like they're white and pretend like they're white, and they like to talk like they're white. And that's why you hear Tommy Sotomayor using so many white talking points on his little paid for agent ass program. But nonetheless, like I stated, for the record, I hate so-called black men like this. Literally despise you sick pieces of crap. Nonetheless, the Flowers case is the latest dispute to reach the justices over allegations of racial bias in an American racial system in which blacks and other minorities are disproportionately represented in prison populations. Some prosecutors, including in southern states like Mississippi, have been accused over the decades of trying to ensure predominantly white juries for trials of black defendants. This has been the case for the longest. We hear in the so-called Constitution that we should be able to have a jury by our peers. That's utterly bullshit. None of these white people are our peers. I don't even know why they even have that in the wording. It's simply not true. And black people should have something to stand on to appeal every single one of our court cases where they've gotten away with having all white juries. I've seen it with my own eyes how they exclude black people for little bitty reasons, and then you find out that some of the white jurors are racist, but yet they let them stay right on those juries. We've seen it so many times. Again, that's because this is a racial system. It's the American racial system where you have a bunch of white racist devils who want to see nothing other than black people put away so that we're not competition for them. As a matter of fact, what's so odd, it's not odd at all. It's typical that on social media you find a lot of the white trolls. They'll say things like, haven't you been to jail before? Aren't you in jail? Or these other kind of statements, these stereotypical statements, because they too know that this is an American racial system. It's set up for us to be going to jail. The white racists, they even know this. That's why they always bring it up in conversations, especially when we're going in hard on them and they don't have anything to say. They don't have any good comebacks because, you know, they're low intellect. So they get into this whole thing that we've probably been to prison before, we've probably been to jail, because it's their assumptions. They're going on their stereotypes. But anyways, I digress. Under a 1986 Supreme Court precedent, people cannot be excluded from a jury because of their race based on the right to a fair trial under the United States Constitution's 6th Amendment and the 14th Amendment promise of equal protection under the law. And in response to Thomas, Flowers' lawyer, Sherry Lynn Johnson, said the jurors that the defense sought to remove were white. But even saying that, let's be clear, whether they were seeking to remove white jurors or not, they always ended up with an all-white jury, 9 times out of 10. So that argument is so weak, it doesn't even hold water. That's how weak it is. But see, they use these type of talking points to try to push their own agenda, and it just backfires. It just backfires. So the other justices largely sounded supportive of Flowers' claim. Quote, "You can't take the history out of this case," unquote, conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh told the state's lawyer, Jason Davies. Another conservative, Justice Samuel Alito, said, quote, "The history of this case prior to this trial is very troubling," unquote, and noted that it was certainly relevant to how the justices decide the dispute. Family, the most recent time Thomas had asked a question was in a February 2016 gun rights case from Maine, as he voiced concern that people convicted of domestic violence misdemeanors could permanently lose the right to own a firearm. In that case, Thomas was the sole dissenter when the court ruled in favor of a black Georgia death row inmate who made a similar claim. So you see what I'm saying, family? I'm going to pause for a second. We have this coon, Clarence Thomas, sitting in the Supreme Court justice because white people designed it that way because they know what type of black man this is. That's why when they make these claims that, well, a black person works here or works there, we as intelligent American descendants of slaves, the American descendants of enslaved Africans, we understand the propaganda that white people are trying to pull when they say those things. White people are not that stupid either, I don't think, anyways, that you're that stupid enough to think that we don't know the difference of these type of black people, because we do. And you do too. But I digress. On race issues, Thomas has been a decisive vote to restrict affirmative action programs designed to help minorities overcome past discrimination. In 2013, he was part of the majority as the court ruled 5-4 to strike down a key section of a Voting Rights Act passed in 1965 to protect black voters in southern states from ongoing discrimination. Did you just hear what I said? He was part of the majority that to strike down a key section of the voting rights that will protect black voters. This is the so-called black man that did just that. Tommy Sotomayor's daddy, Coon Clarence Thomas. These are the type of black men I literally despise. They're scum of the earth. Traitors of the race. If something happened to them, I would laugh. I would care zero about. But I'm going to continue. Family, the High Court heard an appeal by Flowers of his 2010 conviction in his 6th trial on charges of murdering 4 people at the Tardy Furniture Store where he previously worked in the small central Mississippi city of Winona. His lawyers have accused long-serving Montgomery County District Attorney Doug Evans of engaging in a pattern of removing black jurors that indicates an unlawful discriminatory motive. Family, we know this is a fact, and we should be very mindful of this, and we should point this out all the time. We should be pointing this out all the time in this unjust racial system. We should be pointing that out all the time. How they try to remove black jurors from jury trials. They try to do this methodically and all the time. We see this every single time. Every time you see a black man or woman go to court and you see the juries and you see them all white and you see that white judge sitting up there with his black uniform, his trade-in for his white robe and white pointy hat. He's now sitting up there passing judgment and giving black people the majority of time for the crimes that we supposedly do, while giving the white counterparts a slap on the wrist and probation, if that, or just not being charged at all. That's what type of racial system this is. But I digress. Under long-standing law, both prosecutors and defense lawyers can dismiss or strike a certain number of prospective jurors during the selection process without giving a reason. Yes, they can do that, and that's part of the justice system we really should be looking into changing. That just because you've had it this way for all this time doesn't mean that we can't perfect our union, since that's what we're consistently, supposedly trying to do, is perfect our union. And if we're trying to perfect our union and make America great again, then that means we need to change a lot of the habits we've been doing and making it right. And in this instance, when the prosecutor and the defense lawyers dismiss or strike a certain number of prospective jurors, they should now be forced to give a reason, especially when you're trying to dismiss and strike black jurors. You should be required to give a reason. so we can hear what your real agenda is. Evans has given other reasons for striking jurors, but Flowers' lawyers have said those simply masked his real racial motives. Flowers appealed to the Supreme Court after the Mississippi Supreme Court in 2017 upheld his most recent conviction and death sentence, with his lawyers saying the history of striking black jurors in the prior trials was relevant in reviewing the most recent conviction. So in this case, Flowers was found guilty in the first 3 trials, but each time the convictions were thrown out by the Mississippi Supreme Court. The 4th and 5th trials, in which the prosecutor excluded several black potential jurors, ended with no verdict because the jury both times failed to produce a unanimous decision. The outcome of the 6th trial, in which there were 11 white jurors and 1 black juror, is at issue in the case before the High Court. In that trial, the prosecution accepted the first black prospective juror and then excluded the next 5. You understand, family, that again, they know the different types of black people in America. They know which ones to exclude and which ones to keep. And in this case, the Supreme Court Justice decided to keep Clarence Coon Thomas because they knew that he was going to be their good old boy that was going to side with them each and every time. That they wouldn't have to make that hard decision, that hard racist call. They could use the symbol of a black man disguised in the face and body of a Clarence Thomas and use him as their puppet to carry out their agenda. And that's exactly what the Clarence Thomas, Tommy Sotomayor types do. So, the jury in the first trial was all white. Only 1 black person was included in the juries in 3 of the other trials. In the 3rd trial, the state appeals courts specifically found that Evans had intentionally excluded black jurors. Prosecutors said Flowers was upset with the store owner for firing him and withholding his paycheck to cover the cost of batteries he had damaged before his termination. They have said Flowers returned to the store and committed the killings. He was convicted of killing store owner Bertha Tardy, bookkeeper, delivery worker, and part-time employee. All the victims except Golden were white. Each were shot in the head at close range. So, family, just like any other hit piece, when it's against black people, they always have to throw out some of the worst parts of the case. And in this case, throwing out the fact that all of his victims were white and they were each shot in the head at close range. They had to make sure that in Yahoo that they put that in print just so you would know that, so you didn't have any sympathy for this black man getting justice for not being able to have a fair trial. See, they want to make sure that they keep throwing out their dirt and all the shit that they can to make you not see the reality of how bad of a system, of a racial system that they have set up to send us to their jails and prisons. They want to make sure that they conceal that and hide that every which way. But especially by pointing out how bad of a person you are. They want to make sure you know that. Not how bad of a system they've developed and how unfair it is and unjust it is, but just how bad of a person you are. That's the type of system we live in. This racial system, I hope it comes crumbling down. This is Guru at Black Talk Radio. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.